All right, we are back with another special edition for you. Our special guest is a worldwide acclaimed vocalist, writer, and Mrs. Ritchie Blackmore, and his partner in crime of the mighty Blackmore's Night. Please welcome Candice Knight.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jay.
Well,
It's good to see you.
thank you so much. It's great to hear your story. It's a beautiful story. I saw the Beatles in Ed Sullivan when I was five, and my family moved to England. And I spent my first 3 years of school in British school, and we'd spend 30 days every summer in a Volkswagen camper with my parents and two sisters, traveling at our own pace throughout Europe. So
Oh,
I fell in love with the art and the architecture. And my mother used to do those. What do they call it in the cathedrals? The you would scratch over like a statue. You'd create this piece of art from. It's a
oh,
rubbing.
oh,
You've probably seen it. Where they
yeah.
have
I know. I've seen people do that on old gravestones where they do
yeah, you
and
do
it
the
pulls out.
rubbing and you create this replica, this piece of art.
What a
And
great idea.
yeah, it's amazing stuff. You go into those old cathedrals, and the one thing you realize when you travel to Europe and other places is how young America is.
Well, I'll tell you, my children have both been traveling with us. They grew up on the road with us, each of them since they were 18 months old. And so my daughter, now being 15, thanks me for those early days of her traveling all throughout Europe and being able to experience, because it wasn't just a vacation, it was a history lesson,
Yep.
everywhere we went. And to try to explain to someone who's only been here in America, um, like especially in New York, I try to put it in this perspective. Being a New Yorker, I'm from Long Island. If I started to drive at Montauk all the way out East End and ended my drive all the way north upstate, in New York, I would have driven through about maybe six different countries, seven different countries
Oh yeah.
already in Europe. And I'm talking different foods, different cultures, different architectures, the different color of the grass.
Different
Um,
languages,
Different
everything.
histories, different languages. Exactly. So there's so much there in such a small amount of time that you're able to experience and enjoy and absorb and learn from. It's just incredible. I always say it's almost like here in America, although our history is Native American. So we do go
Oh
back
yeah.
pretty far, when we're dealing with that. But it's almost like it's black and white. And then you go over to Europe and everything is seen in color. Just being able to experience all of those amazing, amazing educational experiences there. It's very, very cool.
It is. Well, we love how you celebrate the great music
Yeah.
of the past and the cultures, and of course, bring it forward with Blackmore's Night.
Thank
Please
you.
tell us, meeting Richie, for the first time. I understand you enjoyed the music of Rainbow, as we all did, and Rainbow started, with Richie Blackmore's Rainbow and Rising and Long Live Rock and Roll. It had a little more of a medieval kind of feel, with Ronnie James Dio singing and all of that. Um,
Exactly.
talk about meeting Richie and what that spark was. Obviously, you're a beautiful lady. He was
Oh,
struck by your beauty, obviously, but how did it transpire that you became friends and ultimately partners?
yeah, it was a very natural progression, but it was also sort of my Cinderella story in the rock and roll world, I guess. The kind of thing you hear about, but never think it's going to happen to you. So, growing up in my life, I was always so empowered by music. I mean, it was my escape from the stress and pressures of everything going through, especially as a teenager, you're going through all of these, whatever happens in high school and stuff. And just to try to get away from all of that clickiness and those pressures and not fitting in, being that girl who was always kind of on the outskirts and very just studying. And I would come home and I would put my headphones on and I would look out the window and music would take me to another place. And all of my books were covered with lyrics, not that I wrote, but that other bands had written, but that I felt connected so deeply with my soul that I was just doodling, other people's lyrics all the time. Music was that much to me. It was my religion. It was my breath. So I knew that I had to do something around music for a career, but I just didn't know what it was going to be. I certainly didn't have the confidence to form my own band and step out on stage and, have the spotlight on me. So, trying to find my way in this crazy world, I decided in order to be around music, I could either go work for a record company or a radio station or in a studio. So, when I went to college, I was taking classes in all of these things. Um, I went to work at WBAB, which was the number one Arbitron rated station out here on Long Island, classic rock station. And as fate would have it, Deep Purple rolled into town and called our guys up and said, "Would you like to come out and have a charity soccer match?" And our DJs showed up on the field, and I went simply to cheer on my team. I wasn't on the field, I was cheering our guys on. And Ritchie had stacked his team with ringers. He, being English and had basically been born with a what they call a football, what we call a soccer ball. And so he had been playing for many years and he showed up and Roger Glover showed up. But then they had guys from Sweden and Italy and Romania and all of these amazing, amazing soccer players. And our DJs were not very athletic. And so they completely annihilated my team on the field. And afterwards, I just remember wearing no makeup, my mother's big coat because it was freezing and it was November. And I was such a big fan of rainbows. I knew the songs that I heard on the radio from Deep Purple, but I lived off of Rising for a good 2 years probably in high school. Like that's all that I listened to. And so I wanted to go over and get an autograph with all the rest of the people hovering around Ritchie to get an autograph. And when it was my turn and I made my way through and I just simply asked for an autograph and he looked up and he said with that English accent, "Oh, you're a very beautiful girl." And I went, "Wow, that would have been my perfect Ritchie Blackmore story was to have that moment." He said I was beautiful, isn't that nice? And walk away. But Ritchie sent a roadie through the crowd to find out who I was and asked me to meet him later on at a local pub. And I did. I went with a friend of mine who knew his roadie. So it was the four of us, and we just sat and talked all night until the wee hours of the morning. I literally went right from there to my classes in college the next day. Um, and just spoke on, we connected on so many levels. And it was so refreshing and invigorating and intriguing and entrancing to be able to speak to someone who had such a myriad of inspirations and subjects that he was so versed on because he was so worldly, but he was also so different. We could talk about paranormal things and ghosts and history and castles and Renaissance times and it was just so interesting. And so we became very close friends right away. And he would call me from wherever he was on the road, and we would talk for hours and hours and hours on the phone while he was on tour. And then when he came back, we would have meetings, and he would come out here, or I would go up to visit with him in his big old English Tudor house in the woods, that dark house in the woods in Connecticut. And it just grew like any other relationship. It was friendship first, grew into more than that. I moved in with him in 1991. We met in 89. I went on the road with him in Deep Purple in 1993. By 94, we were engaged. And in 1995, he started with Rainbow again, and they were looking for a lyric writer. They were about to fly in someone who was very prolific in another band who had had lots of hits. I was a closet poet. I used to just write in my journals and poetry all the time, not for anyone in the world to see, just for myself. Um, and he called me up from where the guys were recording up in Massachusetts and said to me, I've got these backing tracks, and he played it to me over the phone before cell phone era. So that's BC era, before cell phones. So I listened to some of the backing tracks. He said, if you can come up with something, let me know by the time you get up here to visit us. Let me see what you got. And if not, I've got basically an airplane ticket to have someone else come in tomorrow. So it took me an hour and 15 minutes on the ferry up here from Port Jefferson up to Bridgeport, and then the rest of the drive. And in that hour and 15 minutes on the ferry, I wrote about 14 verses. and to the backing track he played for me. And then when I got up there, I handed my little notebook over to the producer who took the notebook and circled four different stanzas and said, okay, these are great for verses. We'll put these two together. That's the chorus. And boom, we have our song. Cancel the plane ticket for the guy tomorrow. And that's how I wound up being the co-writer of the lyrics for four tracks on Stranger in Us All with Rainbow, which did very well. Lots of awards and gold records, which was amazing. It was the first time I ever was involved with something like that. And because I was around the studio area whenever they needed a female backing vocalist or a harmony vocalist, they would say, "Hey, can you come in and just contribute your vocals?" And I was more than happy to do that. It was an honor. So of course I did those. But while the other guys were doing their tracks, I think at that point Ritchie he'd been in the rock and roll industry for decades. And in the 90s, for those of us that can remember the 90s, rock and roll and I think music became more corporate run than what he had been used to, just that sheer creative, individualized, driving force of the 60s and 70s and even 80s. So it really changed in the 90s. And it got to the point where some of these big record people were saying, well, send us the demos and we'll let you know if they're okay or not. Or let us know, what the titles are. Well, we don't like this title because it's about this, and that's been done to death already too many times. So change it. And Richie's saying, I haven't made a demo since I was like 16 years old. I'm not about to start now. And so it became, there was a lot of friction there. And it wasn't a good sort of creative friction. It wasn't a good place for him mentally to be. So he and I would sit on the couch watching the snow come down and this big giant fireplace, and we would have his acoustic guitar, and we started writing music just for ourselves, away from the corporate world of what the music world had become, and away from the rock and roll world, really. And he came up with all this music, which was amazing, and I started putting words to it. And those songs became Blackmore's Night music. We didn't think we were going to put it out for the rest of the world to hear, but then we played it for some of our friends at our parties, and they said, "Wow, I love it. If that was on a record, I'd buy it." And then the Japanese record label asked to hear it, and they fell in love with it, and they put it out in Japan first, and they really believed in the project. So that's really what started the whole thing. It was just a labor of love, and songs were written as an escape from the stress of what the world can be. And we still find it such a great place to go for stress relief. That's our healing place, to go to music.
Well, you talk about the Rainbow Rising album. It has a very special place in my heart. Growing up around the world, across the country, I was living in Panama, Central America, graduating high school in the year 75 to 76, of course, the bicentennial summer. And I had started going to arena concerts, prior living in Ohio and Texas. And I
Wow.
was starved for a whole year because no one toured, in Panama. And I get back to after I graduated, I went back to see some friends graduate in Dayton, Ohio. And I look at the concert guide, and the first show coming up was Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the Rising Tour at Hare Arena. And this, of course, was when it's general admission. So being starved for shows, I got
Oh,
there before anybody else. Doors open. I went right to the front. There's no barrier between the audience and the stage back then. And
wow.
literally, Ted Nugent opened, and then we thought he was incredible. But here comes Ritchie and Ronnie James Dio and the rising band, Cozy Powell and everybody. And it just blew me away.
Oh, I'm sure.
Of course, they had the big rainbow, the lights. I know there were technical issues I had heard
Oh,
behind the
yes.
scenes, but
Always. From what I hear, there was always a lot of technical
some
issues with
buzzing,
that.
yeah. But what a phenomenal show! And Richie's fingers just flew up and down the
Mhm.
fretboard. So that
What a way
was,
to start back into the energy of the live show world, like that being the first show back. Oh my
oh
gosh, talk about
yeah.
overload,
And
sensory
and
overload.
my first show I was ever front row. I'd worked in radio
Oh,
in the industry, so I'd been backstage, but that's not like the front row. I mean, when you almost feel like you're in the band, you're right. My
sure.
elbows are on the stage. But
Uh, was
when you talk about the free form and the certainly the creative freedom of the 70s. I just got off an amazing interview right before I joined you with Martin Barr, the longtime guitarist of Jethro Tull since
Of
'69.
course. Of
And
course.
I see an Ian Anderson performed on Shadow of the Moon. And Martin was just talking about how Jethro Tull just made music for themselves. They was so non-commercial, you know. The,
Absolutely.
several of their albums were literally the whole side of the album was like a song, you know.
And you know, and I'll tell you, Ian Anderson is, Richie will still tell you to date what a genius Ian is. And thank goodness over the years they've become friends. And so it's great to get that communication back and forth from wherever in the world Ian is. But we were so lucky to have him play on Play Minstrel Play. And that flute is just so recognizable. When as soon as you hear that, you know he was like the original rock and roll minstrel in my mind, like the first one that I really saw who made flute playing so cool and who wore the Renaissance garb, you know, really with
Yeah.
full on out codpiece, whole deal. Like he really took it to the nines. But just oh my gosh, what individuality
Oh, yes.
and Richie, I remember Richie once said to, it might have been Martin. Richie has a million stories about everybody. I'm trying to keep them all, you know, categorized in my head. I wish he'd write a book because my brain is not, doesn't have the capacity for all the amazing stories that he's got going on. But I remember him saying that he spoke to, I don't want to, it probably was Martin, but if not, forgive me, whoever's listening.
Okay.
That he said, how do you guys keep up with these time signatures that that Ian's writing that you guys are coming up
Yeah.
with. He's
Complex.
there's like there's so much going on. Like if you try to count it, it's not like a typical time signature. And Richie said he was told they just count everything in two. That's how they have to get through
Mm.
where they are in the songs. And he's like, oh, that works. Okay, that makes sense to him. It's like all musicians speak, but it's interesting, if you know about anything in dealing with time signatures, because some of their stuff is so complicated. But Richie's favorite still is War Child, and Sea Lion is one of his favorite songs still
Oh,
today,
sure.
right?
Well,
So
it's when you're empowered by that, where you make the music that you feel is in your heart, you make the artwork, you turn it in,
oh
and
yeah,
you don't want somebody to tell you, well, you got to sound like this, you got to look like that, you got to, change your sound.
no,
Once you've had that, I don't think you can ever quote sell out. You can't, have somebody dictate art to you because art is so
100%.
personal.
That's exactly. It's funny because every once in a while you'll get people who still talk um, about Richie, and the rock and roll world. And the greatest thing about creative freedom is being able to play what you want when you want. So look, he's been over 60 years in the industry giving incredible music.
Yeah.
So I think he's earned the right to, if he doesn't want to play Smoke on the Water every single night, I know fans expect to hear it, when he's in certain bands, and that's amazing. But he's now at the point where back then, when we first started, it was the demand of he needed to play that particular song every single night. And imagine playing that as much as he did for so many years. He's like, I've got all this other stuff I really want to play. But if he didn't play certain songs, he was kind of taken to task over it. So when we started our project, he's now at the point where if he wants to play a Joan Baez song, he can do it. If he wants to play Smoke on the Water, he can still do that too. And he still does, but when on his terms and when he wants to do it. And when you have a taste of that creative freedom, it's so hard to go back in a box of one specific genre, one particular, you can only play rock and roll. You can only be the riff maker. He can pull riffs out of the sky like that, no problem. But after a while, you're like, okay, but I really want to delve into, especially someone who who has that so much depth to them, and who's so prolific in writing and who isn't simply a guitarist, not that that's a simple task, who is more of a composer. I've seen him pull out the most amazing guitar solos on record and then listen back to the mix and go back in that studio and say, you know what? The song doesn't feel like it needs a guitar there. It feels like it needs recorders or a hurdy-gurdy. Take that out, or a string ensemble. And I'm like, why are you taking out that guitar solo? Please don't do that. Leave it. And he's like, no, that's not what the song needs. So he's so into the creating aspect of what is right for the sake of the song, not ego driven, not because he can show off in that place as a guitarist. He could do that all day long, but for him, it's more about what the song is calling for. And again, it comes back to that creative freedom, which when you spread your wings and you have somebody who's able to fly to that capacity musically, it's so hard to put them back in a box creatively.
No doubt. You talk about Joan Baez. I love the version of Diamonds and Rust you guys did on Ghost of a Rose, and
Thank
so
you.
many fine albums, Under a Violet Moon and Secret Voyage, Fires at Midnight, Dancer in the Moon, and of course you now have Seaglass. Um, Talk about creating and how you decide what goes on what album, and all this.
Yeah, I can't believe I believe it's 27 years now of being with Blackmore's Night. So I think if I'm not mistaken that Richie's been in our band longer than he's been in the bands Rainbow and Deep Purple put together. Like considering he like went in for a few years, came out for a few years, went in for a few years, came, like done all that. Like if you put it together, he's been in this band for, it's almost 3 decades in this band alone. So we've got 11 albums, not including live albums and stuff like that. And it's been an incredible journey since 1997, since we began it. So I think basically the main difference is, oh, and by the way, we're halfway through recording the next Blackmore's Night album, so it's still a constant. We're still a work in progress. We're still
Cool.
doing it. But so I think the main difference is basically when I'm working with Ritchie in Blackmore's Night, he has a tendency to come up with all of the music, and I'm always, as he says, like being a buzzy bee around the house. Like I'm always trying, I'm doing mommy stuff, doing the dishes here, as the grocery is, done, and making dinner, laundry, running the kids, whatever. And so he's in the room playing his acoustic guitar, and he'll come up with these incredible melody lines, and he'll call me in from the other room and say, "Okay, I've got this idea. Can you like hum this line over here? Let's make sure it's in the right key." And once we make sure that everything fits right, and then I'll just take that idea of that melody line and live with it for a few days and just, I always find even with his instrumentals, any part of his music, it's so visual that if you close your eyes, you get pictures painted in your head about what the song is trying to tell you that it wants to be about. So I feel like my role in Blackmore's Night is to sort of channel that and open up creatively and just, the words come if I think about it, if I overthink, everything shuts down. But if I'm driving from my house to CVS or someplace, where I'm doing a million things and I can just like be in that mode where I'm just not thinking that much except for, focusing on where I'm going from point A to B. I can live with the songs. I can see the pictures painted. And then I have all these little pieces of scrap paper with all the words written as, we in my car, in my truck, wherever we're driving to, or just, sitting out on my deck and having those moments of silence where the air is just so fresh and the breeze is going through your hair and you get to sit under a starry sky and you just feel open creatively. So it's those moments where I'm finding that the lyrics just come, pouring in, and then I fit them together to the music, and that's hopefully the perfect marriage of music and lyric, and makes um it kind of creates that marriage of the two where the hopefully the listener doesn't just listen to the song, but they can see a part of themselves in the song, and then they can resonate deeply on it from a personal level and feel like they're being taken on an emotional journey. And it's very different from when I'm writing my own songs, like with Seaglass is it's not a Blackmore's Night album, it's a solo album. And Seaglass came from a compilation of songs that I have had over the last 10 years. And I didn't even realize 10 years had passed because so many chunks of time had been taken out, and I'm always in the now. So I feel like COVID ate a good 2 to 3 years out of everybody's lives worldwide, where we lived in fear and locked up and couldn't go outside and couldn't talk, be around people. And so that ate a good chunk out. Then it took quite a while for my industry to bounce back and be able to go see live concerts again. You're talking about that, going to see live concerts and being, not being able to see them for a while. So COVID did that to all of us for a good amount of years. But also in that time period, so many changes occurred. My children went from toddlers to to teenagers. They're now towering over me. And the last solo album that I put out was Starlight Starbright, which was basically love songs and relaxing songs for them to listen to before they went to sleep at night. Or I say children of all ages, if you just need like a relaxation moment, you could put on Starlight Starbright. It's not just for kids. But so that was the last time that I did that. And so when I started writing, all of these things, I write when there are poignant moments happening in my life, and I never know when that's going to happen. So one of the songs is dedicated to my children. It's called Promise Me, but then it winds up being sort of like a message for the whole world and things that all these positive messages that I want really not only for my kids, but that the world could help to, hope to live out as well. Um, I have both of my children singing on that song, and it was before their voices dropped down, where now they sound they sound so grown up, even though they're teenagers. But luckily, I got that childhood innocence, captured on record. Uh, but other majorly poignant things, like I lost my dad after a year's battle of cancer. That was horrible, but I wound up writing the line between uh, about experiences with my father, memories with my dad, and the line between wound up being the moment when I wound up at his funeral in the graveyard and saw that on all of the headstones, they just had the birth date and the death date and this line between. And to me, the least important days were the birth date and the death date. The most important time was sort of just washed away by just this line that, but in that line was the person's everything. It was his experiences, his journey, how he affected other people, the stories that still go on to this day, even though they're not around anymore, stories they experienced before you even knew them. So many, the myriads of different stories and levels and textures of what that person was, and how much they meant. And so it's so much more than just that line between, it's their everything. Or songs about like the unsung hero or Seaglass, which was super important as the title track, because I actually wound up getting diagnosed with cancer. It was almost overlooked, and I bounced back and forth between two doctors for a good 6 months. Both of them told me it was nothing. And my husband, thank goodness, came and told me that he's going to come with me, and he wanted something biopsied. And he really got face to face with this particular doctor and said, I don't like that you keep pushing her off and saying it's nothing. Let's biopsy this. And sure enough, we were going on the road with Rainbow in 2019, and then back to back with Blackmore's Night. And I went, and because my husband came with me and really pushed the issue, they did the biopsy, and then we got on the plane, and I went overseas. And as soon as I landed, my mom, who's on my HIPAA form, said, "You need to call me as soon as you get to the hotel." And I called her and I said, "What's going on?" I thought there was something wrong with my children. So I was very nervous. And she said, "No, it's not the kids. The kids are fine. But doctor called, and it's cancer, and you need to have had that out like yesterday." So we needed to find a surgeon who, overseas, and all this stuff is going on while we're performing shows, trying to keep people, excited and on their feet. And I'm like back there, and I've got meanwhile this big giant gash has just been, operated on my back, and they're going, "Don't move too much, don't sweat too much." And I'm like, I have to have to get people involved with this. So it wound up being a number of surgeries that were pretty intense. But all of this stuff happened, and then I wound up writing Seaglass, which was there was a lot of different symbolism within that. It was not only what we all experienced in COVID, and I was trying to get my little children out of the house, and where screens were becoming the norm for these little kids, and masks and not being around people. So how could I keep them normal? I bring them to the beach. I bring them around the healing power of nature. We went out there and we found sea glass on a local beach here, and every day we'd go out, and that would be our treasures. And that wound up being this incredible parallel between the human condition and what we go through, and how we're broken down in life. We all get broken. We all go through experiences. We all go through loss. We all get shattered and we get scattered. But the point is not to allow it to end you and end your existence, and to be tossed and tumbled by life like this glass is tossed and tumbled by the ocean and returned back into our worlds. And hopefully we can still be illuminated by the sun, and still people are still looking upon us as if we're treasure, no matter how our edges get softened and how we come back as still the same but somehow changed and different. that's really the story of Seaglass. So there's so many different levels of symbolism within that one particular song alone. So each one of these songs obviously is very important to me and wound up being the collection over the last 10 years of what wound up being Seaglass.
Well, that's amazing. And you talk about being on tour with Rainbow and Blackmore's Night. Um, in recent years, Ritchie did return to Rainbow. In closing, what can you tell us why he did that and what he got out of that and why he's back and most comfortable with Blackmore's Night?
I think that he just, Richie is, as I like to say about Richie, he's predictably unpredictable. If you tell him he needs to do something, he will go out of his way to make sure he's not doing that. So um, he does these things when he wants to do them. And I think that he had spent enough time away from the rock world at that point. He knew that that nostalgia is such a powerful, such important thing.
Sure.
So not only for, I guess, for him musically, but also, of course, for the fans and for the audiences. And I think that was really the main reason that he did that was to bring those songs back. Honestly, the last time he did that was 2019. He hasn't stepped on a plane since then. We have no plans to go back overseas, unfortunately, at this point. He's got some health issues that are happening. He has 6 stents in his heart. He's got back problems and gout. And I mean, don't forget, he's 80 years old. So a lot of the people from his era of performing are already retired and or have gone through horrible medical issues or aren't around anymore. So the fact wherever he wants to be to step out on those stages and play anything he wants to play, for me is just, each moment is a blessing watching him still be able to play and perform and do what he loves and do what he does the best. So whatever genre of music he chooses to do it, I'll be there, supporting him and his decisions. But I think at that point he just really wanted to get out and start playing the electric again and play it, have people be able to hear those songs again. And I know he's talking about some other stuff as far as the future is concerned. He does every once in a while mention it, and we start going on YouTube sites and looking on the internet for people to participate, and then he kind of puts it on a back burner. So it comes and goes, once he gets that spark to want to do something beyond just mentioning it, I'll be sure and let you guys know. I'll be the first in line and first, I get so excited about this stuff. The fact that I was able to stand on stage and he asked me to do even backing singing with some of these incredible, oh my God, with Spotlight Kid and Stargazer, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
some of these unbelievable songs and I knew every one of them from growing up. It was just, it's just incredible to support the person you love, to be on that stage with songs that are nostalgic for you as well. I'm like his biggest fan when it comes to that stuff. And every one of those songs from all different singers, whether it was Since You've Been Gone or All Night Long. So I mean, all these different singers that had such a stamp and a mark and an individuality on those Rainbow songs. But that one constant is always Blackmore. It's always going to be Ritchie Blackmore. And it's just amazing. So whatever he chooses to do, like right now we've got 6 tour dates coming up, and I'm so happy to be
Yes.
able to still step on stage with him wherever he wants to play. I'm fine with that. I keep trying to push out of that comfort zone box a little bit more, but he has he's got a back problem, so it's hard for him to get from place to place, sitting too long and in cars and traveling and being stuck in an airport, cancellations, delays, all those problems with traveling places. So wherever we're driving to at this point, we've got Pennsylvania, New Jersey, a couple of shows upstate New York, we've got Virginia, we've got Delaware. Again, every show, we have a great time. Every show for me is a blessing to be able to get out there and still play with him and watch him do what he loves to do best.
Well, we love what you love, and that is so great that you're taking such good care of him. We can't wait to come out and see the shows, of course, see Glass and all your incredible catalog with Blackmore's Night. Our special guest has been the one and only Candice Knight. Candice, thank you so much for joining us. It's a supreme pleasure celebrating this amazing musical magic that you guys make, and we can't wait to talk to you again soon. So please until that time, please keep creating and keep making the magic.
Will do. Thank you so much, Jay. Great talking to you. Thanks, everyone.